Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 11th episode of Live Origami Podcast with Alen Leit. Today, we continue our interview series. It's episode number 11, and we have a wonderful guest, Roman Prokopchuk, who will share his story of building his business through some unexpected changes in life. I believe that so many of us, through what is happening currently or happened in 2020, found themselves in a position where their life expectations, their business expectations, their career expectations were just in such a mess that you needed to make a change, or you are in a place where you need to make a change. And I believe that story of Roman can really give insights in terms of what it's like to live through it, as well as how to get through it and come out stronger. Welcome, Roman, to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to share your story today. And let's start from looking at the background of what was the journey that you were expected to live, and then what happened.
Yeah, so I don't, I mean, I'm a first generation immigrant from Ukraine to the US. I came to the US in 1990. Ukraine was still under the Soviet Union and gained its independence in 1992. Came over with six other family members. So it was one of those things. I came over young enough that I went to school right away. So I assimilated well. And obviously, I don't think I have an accent at this point. So it was easy to kind of pick up the language, kind of, jump into school. And then I graduated high school, went to college. College, it was a few years. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I decided on criminal justice during college. I also was thinking about going to the Marine Corps as an officer in the US. If you are, thinking about becoming an officer or getting an officer commission, versus enlisting directly. So if you are in college and you attain a bachelor's degree, you can basically sign up, do kind of the interview process, and go to Quantico, Virginia, train. And basically, if you complete the training, get a second lieutenant commission. So I thought I was going to do that, but I ended up getting sick. I didn't know, but I had an ulcer for several years, but it was caused by a bacteria called H. pylori. So I couldn't do the pre-ship PFT, which is a physical fitness test, before going to the training. And I guess it's a blessing in disguise because I don't know, what would have happened there with that. And then last semester of school, I had interned with the Secret Service on the counterfeit currency squad. I held the top secret federal clearance. That took me like 6 months to get the clearance. And I thought I was going to go that route, kind of the federal route, forensics, different like criminal profiling, stuff like that, really interested in me. And then, that ended. And then I graduated and the recession hit. So state, local, federal agencies in the US froze hiring, froze budgets. And I was kind of stuck applying to hundreds of jobs, couldn't find anything, was kind of down and depressed. And then only thing that really kept me sane was going to the gym. And, I struck up a conversation with somebody I met before. And then one day they said, after your workout, come out, I want to give you something, which obviously could go different directions in terms of a conversation. But they opened their trunk and gave me a packet. It was about search engine optimization. So they said, read this and then take another month or two, read up on it online, and you can, start doing it for my business. And that's how I kind of got my start within digital
Mm.
marketing.
So
And
just let's focus here a little bit on this idea. So basically, what helped you to make a transition is that you put yourself in an environment that supported you, and you connected with people there. And then through knowing what is happening in your life, one of the people who knew you reached out to you and decided to help you through providing this information and telling you, hey, dude, look at this direction, research it.
yeah, and it's being open to it. Obviously, I got into it out of necessity. I guess, the saying is like the most dangerous animal is like the cornered one. So it was just like I had no other option because for months and months I was applying and I was applying to stuff outside of criminal justice. So no one was really hiring in the US for anything. Companies just froze budgets. And if they had money saved up in terms of earnings, they didn't want to spend it because they didn't know the future in terms of, if the economy was going to get better anytime soon. So I took that, basically did that for a few months. Funny story, I've told it a few times. That person basically obviously was going to compensate me, but his cat got cancer. So he spent $20,000 on the
Oh.
cat. So some of those funds that were supposed to go to me basically paid for the cat that ended up passing anyway. But it's one of those things where I guess it's a learning experience. And I think it's important, regardless if you're compensated or not, that skill set that you develop and that experience. Because I value experience a lot more than,
Mhm.
kind of reading something in a book. You have real world kind of examples of what you've done. So
Mm.
basically, put my resume out there in a company called LexisNexis. It's owned by other companies, other subsidiaries, basically in a legal vertical where I got hired. So law firms around the US, small, medium, large size law firms. And basically, I got picked up as a contractor. So that's another thing where it's like they offered me $16 an hour. So with a bachelor's degree, I'm like, am I worth more? So on and so forth. So I kind of had to put my ego to the side and say, this may open some doors. So there, I was there for about a year and a half, and then I got hired, full time salary. And I was there eventually managing seven-figure portfolios of, 100K or higher spends in terms of accounts. And that's where I kind of decided there also, there's a lot of people doing what I do, and I have that knowledge base already. And I saw people leaving, starting their own agencies, freelancing, becoming digital nomads, going to other companies. And I was kind of like the stepping stone. So from that, I held a few other director roles on the agency side. I worked with a bunch of Fortune 500 clients, managed teams, a lot of pharmaceutical, life science companies, financial services. And then in 2012, decided to start my own agency. So I founded the agency, and since then I've been really running with that. And it's been a blessing because it's an industry where it's ever changing, and you have to keep learning because obviously new platforms come out, new tactics come out that work in terms of attracting your ideal client online and gaining visibility. And it's one of those things, if maybe I got a career where it's like doing the same thing, not necessarily the same thing, something may change or not, but it's so fast paced in terms of changing with the internet that it always keeps
Mhm.
me kind of motivated and driven to keep learning.
Got you. What about the idea, like, to dive a little bit deeper into that experience of having that dude actually throwing you over and spending the money on the cat rather than what he agreed with you? What did you learn from that experience?
I mean, you have to take the bad with the good. So he basically, gave me an opportunity to jump in this career. So if I didn't have that, few months on my resume with him and that, basic skill set and search engine optimization, some social media stuff, obviously social media was still in its infancy. I wouldn't have got the opportunity at the next company, and then I wouldn't got that experience and
Hmm.
potentially never really founded my own company. So it's like you have to take the bad with the good. So,
Got
if
you.
something happens, if it's a setback or a hurdle, obviously with business, you're going to have financial issues in terms of people screwing you over or not paying you, or, and digital marketing just disappearing if you have remote employees or not doing something on time and you're out of pocket. But it's one of those things where, you can salvage it or you can learn from it and then apply it
Hmm.
in the future.
So basically, you've used that to build your resilience, and you use that knowledge to further to your advantage. You didn't get yourself down, but you said like, okay, we are here where we are. We need to take the next step. What is it, right?
Yeah, and it's emotional IQ. So I'm glad it happened earlier because I would have reacted differently if it happened down the line. So let's 5 years down the line and I would have had a similar experience. It exposed me to that a lot sooner so I can adapt a lot better for, future challenges.
Beautiful. Let's talk about the process of, let's say, being passionate about what you do. How did you like? Was CEO something that you became passionate about through time, or what is it for you there, or was it a stepping stone where you ended up founding your own agency and that was something that you're passionate about? Where's your passion currently?
Yeah, so I think in digital marketing or I mean other, businesses, you have a kind of core competency or you're like the expert in this. So that was kind of like the pillar that my foundation in digital marketing was based out of. And then I saw I didn't want to pigeonhole myself because the internet was ever changing. And I saw, started connecting the dots. Okay, well, social media integrates like this, paid search integrates like this, local search, online reputation management, and so on and so forth in terms of digital marketing, and started learning and, becoming somewhat of an expert in all of those, and figuring out how they can all connect and work for a potential client. So I think, like I said, the ever changing, climate of the internet and of the industry keeps me kind of motivated and passionate about it. And also the fact that, you're helping companies employ different people and then employ more people and then put food on the table. So it's like, even though, like, okay, you're running a campaign, but that campaign may have delivered, 10, $20 million for a company, that now they can hire more people or keep the people that they have on a payroll. So it's one of those things where it's like you're a direct reflection of that company, of your client, and you're helping them to succeed. So even though it's not like, you're not a heart surgeon and you didn't save somebody's life in surgery, you're still like connected into the whole kind of grand scheme of things.
Very interesting perspective. So you find in serving your clients and helping them to build their marketing a way where you support not only them as a business and driving revenue, but actually supporting their employees, their families, and that's a bigger way of giving as well. Like, would you say that that kind of empathy and a wish to support others, what that was the core thing that drove you in the beginning to the Marine and into the service, or what was it?
Marine Corps, I thought possibly as an officer, like advanced as an officer, getting into intelligence, then going into, like agency like NSA or FBI, like it would be a stepping stone for that. And then also in terms of kind of picking up a intelligence skill set, that then I would have had security clearance and stuff like that. I think it's at the time of that mindset. So I was, 21, 22 at the time. It was, I would say, what was it already? It was, 5, 6 years after 9/11. So it was still that kind of climate around. So yeah, I think there it would be more of like giving back and helping and stuff like that. But I mean, at that time in my 20s, it was still like, selfish motivation. So as soon as I got into digital marketing and working for other company, it was, getting promoted as fast as possible, obviously getting a bigger bonus, a bigger office, a bigger paycheck. So it was selfish at first. And I think when I turned 30, my mindset switched to a more giving back legacy mindset and
Mm,
becoming more of a, heart-led entrepreneur.
cool. Tell us a little bit more about the business that you're doing, right? So you have your agency. What do you focus on? What is it about?
Yeah, so kind of like I said, the core discipline is search engine optimization, but overall digital marketing strategy and attracting your ideal customer and messaging them or presenting them with who you are and information about you that would better, able them to make a educated decision in terms of a buyer, whether that's a product or service, online, and increasing your visibility overall. So obviously that's with search engine optimization, optimizing your website, creating a content strategy, social media strategy, organic and paid, paid search, online reputation management, media buys. So basically figuring out, and that's step one for a business, because oftentimes they want to throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks. But you really have to start off with who you are as a core and who you're hoping to attract. Because with trying to attract everybody, oftentimes you attract nobody. So figuring out who your target audience is, and once you know that, you can figure out where that target audience spends majority of their time online. If it's B2B, maybe LinkedIn. So you do direct lead gen in terms of a LinkedIn campaign, or you're driving traffic from a LinkedIn campaign to something else, or you're, figuring out in terms of, supporting assets, or you're running a campaign and then you have subsequent webinars. Whatever you're doing, you have to really know who your target audience is to begin with.
Mm. Where did you manage through this time of founding the agency? Where did you get it to? Like in terms of how many, how big is it? How big is your team? Where are you at?
Yeah, so I mean, it's around 3 to 4 people, but it's a different model. So I've never had overhead. So before even COVID, everything was remote. So there's no overhead for that. And then there's a lot of outsourcing in a sense, but it was with people that I've networked with and worked with and familiar with their skill set, and basically freelancers, people that have time in terms of able to take on work. So basically scoping a project, getting a client once that client is, signs a contract, and then activating. So it's like people, I mean, I guess in the military, like if you're in special forces or whatever, you get activated, you have to come in. So I know what somebody's core competency or skill set is that obviously, if they're working full time, 20, 30 hours, with me and somewhere else, the majority of the time, I know what their time block is. And then I know I can scope a project out fairly well to understand how much time it's needed for that project. So
Mm,
basically, activating so there's no really waste, because a lot of the time, like working at other agencies, let's say the agency gets a client in pharma life sciences, which oftentimes have a ridiculous marketing spend. So, they win a 20 million, $30 million contract. Now they hire a whole team. Now, if that contract isn't retained, usually a year. So if they, choose to go a different route, that 30% team is, laid off.
mhm.
So with the structure I have, there's never really like waste in terms of worrying about letting somebody go or, laying somebody off. There's always adequate amount of hours for adequate amount of work.
Got you. So basically, it's like contractor work, just like in the army, where you have people, if you need them, you bring them in, they do the work and continue doing whatever else they're doing, right?
Yeah, but obviously overseeing the quality of the work, overseeing and managing the relationship with the clients, and basically having a certain level and certain standard that things should be done by, but obviously not having, if that contract allots, let's say 20 hours of work a month for something, but you have somebody full time that has, 160 hours technically in the month. What are you going to do with, the rest of the hours? And if you
Mhm.
have them on salary, they're still getting paid. So I think for me and my structure, it's worked out well that there's not overhead or a lot of like unneeded spending, that money can be reinvested into other things.
Cool. In terms of functioning, right? You as an individual, as an entrepreneur, what is your core function in the business? And in terms of activities that need to be done, how do you manage your involvement and where are you in terms of positioning and work in the business?
Yeah, so managing relationships ultimately, because a lot of them obviously I've built over time, and scoping and tactical planning. I mean, I see myself as like the chief marketing officer, if you will. I mean, I founded the company, but
Mhm.
I'm the main one in terms of like developing the strategy and tactics, and then obviously circling back if it makes sense
Mhm.
team wise, and then implementing, and a lot of like client side stuff, like the high level client side stuff in terms of renewals or scoping proposals and stuff like that. So just kind of top level management, strategy and tactics.
All right. How do you manage to like take into account, right? You this business should be like really strict in terms of schedule to get everything on time, to get everything organized as well. You have your own input in there, not just management. How do you manage to get everything done and at the same time find time for your family and for self care?
Yeah, I mean that's difficult sometimes. I'll be honest. I mean, I have my podcast as well. I'm a foster parent, and then other things going on. Um, just I guess it's tough because when you're scaling, stepping away and not micromanaging, so understanding and having processes in place, in terms of fulfillment or what you're doing as a business, and showing and plugging the employees that are in that process or in that fulfillment in terms of a service that they can adequately do the job in terms of like the level of care and expertise that you require, but obviously spot checking and putting kind of your seal or stamp of approval before anything really goes out. So it's I guess trusting who you have on your team, with developing the right processes, for fulfillment or whatever you're doing as a business. And I think it's hard when you first start because everything is kind of your baby and you don't want to let go. But at some point, if you want to scale to wherever you want to go, you're gonna have to take a few things off your plate.
Mm. Let's talk a little bit about systematizing. What have you found for the business that you're doing? Um, what kind of systems are in place to help you achieve that?
Yeah, I mean the most, I guess the first thing, I guess, project management. So that's where everything is, that's where your team is. That's obviously if you have a process for something specific, like the way you do a specific strategy, those steps are built out in that, and the deadlines are built out in that, and the time allotment, estimates are built out in that. So I think in terms of a services business, your main thing is really accurately scoping and having a project management system that really documents everything and anyone can reach easily. Because I mean, it's been sometimes a bottleneck where a team member saves something, let's say in Drive or somewhere else, and they're supposed to be saving it to the project and whatever project management system you may be using. So I think having that really makes everything more cohesive and is like the building block of what you do as a services business. So I think
Hmm.
that's one of the most important things. And then other things in terms of alleviating time, different tools and software from the marketing side. So different, like let's say for keyword tracking, for search engine optimization, organic search. So you have that in terms of what I personally use is called advanced web ranking. It's one of the most cost effective and like accurate things that I've found over my whole career. So using that and creating dashboards, I think, is important. I use a software called Sife, so it's all-in-one dashboard. So you can create a universal dashboard and feed everything that you're doing technically for your
Hmm.
client, and that alleviates time in the sense where like you're giving the client, you can give the client obviously access, so it gives you
Hmm.
top level information how a campaign is going, different components of it. So what I've seen is a bottleneck in terms of client communication. There's a lot of needy clients that'll just bombard you with questions that could be simply answered if you give them access or a certain amount of access to the information of what's actually going on.
Oh,
So
very
that
cool.
alleviates, yeah, that alleviates time in terms of back and forth communications. And obviously, if the client has a more in-depth questions, there could be a ad hoc report sent out like it usually is on a monthly basis, or answering an email and clarifying something, but really like delivering and taking things that even waste a few minutes a day could go a long way, because you can use that few minutes to something that's billable or something that can scale your business.
Got you. In terms of like the project management systems and things that help you to stay organized, can you give some tools that others can also introduce into their business? Like, can you name some what you're using?
Yeah, Asana, I've used as the most recent tool. I think I've used at Task. I've used a lot of them and kind of cycle through them. They, for the most part, they all do the same thing, but they'll have like their one unique value proposition, their little fancy feature. So I think regardless of what you go with, I think you have to look at price point and the size of your team and whatever fits, because they all theoretically do the same thing on a primary level. It's just one of those, like, all the add-ons that you can possibly have on there. If that's what you're looking for, then yeah, because I know a lot of people get tools that are expensive, but they don't
Mhm.
necessarily need them. They need like the basic version of it that only uses a few features, but they elect to go for something more expensive that kind of takes money away that could be used elsewhere.
Hmm. What about communication? How do you streamline communication within your business to get everything done?
Yeah, so I mean, email, Zoom, um, at this point, or via the project management system itself, and then just kind of spot checking before deadlines, during deadlines, after. Because a lot of things in terms of strategy or what's going on in terms of tactics, let's say to promote an event, the strategy is usually doing before. So what that build up to that event is during the event, communicating with people. Obviously, it's a little harder now in person events, but communicating, at that event itself, virtual or in person. Then after, obviously, following up with the emails you received, following up with the people that you've met, or were at your booth for a system like that. It's just implementing and having time constraints and really checking and spot checking things before that deadline. So it doesn't pass that deadline. You have like buffers in place that don't create a bottleneck. So you'll have a task like, make sure where this project is, it should be at 80% or close to finish. Where is it at? And then allotting an adequate time. So let's say it's in 2 days, and you think it should be done in 2 days if you're at this step now. So circling back and figuring out where that is.
Oh, that's a great
Obviously,
advice. That's a great advice.
yeah, and I mean, it could be done at any level. I mean, I worked at companies that have had 50,000 employees in five, and there's commonality there in terms of bottlenecks, regardless of the size of the company. If you're, a startup, a, privately held company, a publicly traded company, you still are going to have the same kind of bottlenecks if you're in the same industry. So I think creating those kind of like checkpoints basically, or like milestones, usually it depends on the structure, but that's usually like the responsibility of a like a relationship manager, in terms of a role like client facing, and they check up and kind of reel everybody else, or a project manager, if you will. So I think that's one of the important. If you get to a certain level and you're in digital marketing, having somebody that has the responsibility of project management, because it'll streamline things a lot faster as well.
Got you. You mentioned, right, that you're a foster parent and you have a lot of other things beside that core business going on. How do you manage time? Do you have like a specific time frame where you do only work and then the rest is dedicated to your family, or how do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, so right now, like all the passion projects and stuff like that, like, I mean, my podcast, like I monetize it to a certain extent, and it's actually like led to leads in business, both from interviews on my show, and then I had a goal of going on 40 other shows or media outlets. Last year, I got to 75, which almost doubled my goal, which was cool. And that's actually gained a lot of positive things in terms of like my personal brand and networking and stuff like that. So that's usually done in between. I have breaks if I have a lunch, or if I'm doing something during the day, or usually when everybody's asleep. So like some of the stuff in terms of like, I still like editing the audio, at least like a final run through for each episode for my show myself. Like I wasn't really big into audio engineering, but there's something like relaxing about it in terms of just
Mhm.
listening through the episode and then like thinking back, because some of the stuff like leaves your mind from that conversation, and like jotting down kind of like those important things. So a lot of that is actually done when everybody's asleep, which sometimes I have to catch up on sleep because I'm going to bed at like 2 or 3 in the morning. But billable stuff, client development, relationship building, stuff like that is done obviously during the day. And then when everybody's to bed, I'll take a few hours to test or read up on or network or connect with people, or do pro bono stuff like for charity and stuff like that, usually when everybody is asleep.
Cool. Tell a little bit about the pro bono stuff. Like, what's this about? Like, what are you doing there?
Yeah, so I've helped like different charitable organizations, nonprofits, like no charge, in terms of evaluating what they're doing, if they have certain like fundraiser stuff like that, how to best promote that to make sure their website is adequately performing in terms of being optimized in general, being optimized for that event, developing a social media strategy to promote that, capture that information, because they usually are, and the cases that I've had, have a goal in terms of raising, funds for that charity, to have that charity obviously function, because they may not get a lot of government funding or things like that. So figuring out like what the goal of that event is, and, if it's double what they got in terms of donations last year and what they're able to work with from a marketing spend, figuring out if they're able to reach or attract net new, obviously, donors or people to the event. Sometimes it's a concert or, some kind of charity auction, things of that nature, or just in general, talking about what they're doing. I've connected with different organizations that are in the foster space, foster and adopt, to talk about like my experience and more so also on the other end of it, like advocacy for change in terms of foster care system. Because I mean, in the U.S., there's a lot of holes and a lot of kind of red tape in terms of foster care that. I think the process and the division of child services can be run a lot smoothly with a lot of less red tape. So just talking about my experiences on different news outlets and stuff like that, and hopefully bringing about some kind of change or some kind of system that's better than what's
Hmm.
currently in place.
Got you. That's fascinating. Let's talk about like having all those things that need to be taken care of. Let's talk about goal setting and setting priorities in your life, right? We are at a really good stage currently where it's the beginning of the year. Let's talk about how do you plan what you got to do? Like, do you plan for the year, for the quarter? What's your mindset, and what is the process of making those priorities?
Yeah, I mean, I have an overall goal, or specific goals in specific, I guess, areas of my life, but more so, I think it's important, like daily, a daily to-do list, which I consider like the shortest short-term goals that I have. That obviously, my goal is to complete X, Y, Z, and that's in the next 12 hours. So sometimes, obviously, there's more things on that list on a daily basis than others. So jotting down, I wouldn't say going over about like 10. If it goes over 10, I mean, it's not manageable. It gets a little chaotic in terms of looking at, I like jotting it down. Like you can use apps and stuff, but I think when you actually write something down, it's like more tangible in terms of like my mind to actually get it done. And there's something satisfying about like taking a pen or pencil and crossing it off a list. So writing those 10 things down and then prioritizing for that day. So, the top three things that you absolutely have to get done. So technically those seven could either be given to somebody else if it's a work related thing, or if they are figuring out who to assign, if they can alleviate that or take that off your plate, or some things that aren't imperative to get done that day. So like it's a nice thing to do now, but technically could be done by, let's say, Friday, and figuring out and structuring it like that. And I mean, setting general ones. So like I had the goal, like I said, to be on 40 different shows or do 40 different podcast interviews and media publications. Like I had a document tracking it, but I wasn't like, oh my God, I'm at 39 or whatever. It's just like, what naturally came. And then, I checked that at the end of the year and I almost doubled it, which obviously is great.
Cool. In terms of, you mentioned, right, you have like that major goal that you're working towards. Do you have like a lifelong vision, or how far ahead do you plan?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I feel any goal is a moving target, at least personally, because if I have a stationary goal of, let's say, um, selling my company in the next 10 years, I don't think in 10 years that may interest me. And like I've had people on my show where like one of the common questions I ask is what motivates you to succeed? Those motivations were different 5, 10, 15 years ago. So what I'm currently like motivated by and driven, and what like my vision is now, based on my situation in my life and the variables around me, in 1 year, 2 years, 1 month, maybe 1 week, may be totally different. And I have to kind of pivot how I'm going to achieve that. So I think keeping goals as moving targets instead of stationary destinations for me keeps me that more driven.
Got you. In terms of doing that to-do list, right, that you plan out on a daily basis, do you jot down in a journal, or is just a piece of paper, or how do you do that?
I have a bunch of journals and a bunch of notebooks. Unfortunately, I open them up maybe once a month. So it's literally like rip out a piece of paper out of a notebook and then just, I'm a lefty writer, so I'm like kind of sloppy too. Sometimes not legible at all. But Yeah, just quickly what comes to mind, and I think if you have to think about it for a long time, it's really not important for that day. So things that like on top of your head, one, two, three, obviously something you may miss, but don't like overthink like because you need like these 10 things to get done. Like if you can think of 5 things, great. You can add something later in the day, but don't like overthink it because I think if you're overthinking it and then looking for things to accomplish that day, they may not be in a grand scheme of things as important to get done that day.
Hmm. In terms of project management, right, and managing what you have to do in a business, how do you structure the project itself? Do you use a specific system, or what helps you to plan out the project so that you know that this would become real?
Yeah, so there's different obviously components that are already like structured, like a fulfillment process. So onboarding of a new client, launching a certain effort, obviously developing content strategy. So there's like steps for each of those. So how to do a content strategy that is obviously user focused and doesn't necessarily focus on search engines alone. Because back in the day, people were just writing bad content to appease getting on the first page. When I first started, it was like the Wild West, which was awesome in the terms of like getting to the first page and ranking for certain terms with tens of thousands of monthly searches. But in terms of user experience, you have to think, okay, you have a piece of content, okay, you're on the first page, but if somebody gets to that page and they're not there or the information that's there isn't what they're looking for, they're going to bounce. So eventually the bounce rate is going to be extremely high, even though when you're on the first page, Google or any other search engine wants to appease a searcher. So the information on the first page has to be as relevant as possible. So if your bounce rate is going up, theoretically, even though you rank high, eventually you're going to be bumped down because that user experience is so low. It's not any adding any value for anybody visiting. So it's like one of those things. So having a strategy, obviously, for that, having a content strategy for, let's say, social media content or asset creation or video creation. So each component, if you're creating content of different types in house and how to kind of push that into the market. If you have a tactic, so you created a video to then go on a specific YouTube channel or wherever you're putting it, and then you want to do market with that video. Where are you going to market it? What is the spend? So having like that specific fulfillment process for each of those components.
Mm. So basically, you create a structure like a template for every single business process that you have in the business. And then when that happens, you just come back to it and use it, adapt it to the current situation, and then you're ready to go as fast as possible.
Yeah, it's a rough framework for the most part because obviously no two clients or no two campaigns are alike. But having that roadmap is important because it at least keeps you on track in terms of timelines and keeps you on track in terms of like the biggest things. So like create or develop the video, record the video in person, or use assets to create it. So let's say you allot a week to that, and then 5 days for edits. So you already know, like regardless of what the strategy in there is, which is unique to that account, which obviously you can add specifically to that. So shooting on site versus remote, what's the time frame? All of that can be added, but like I said, that framework will keep you on track.
Got you. Let's talk about marketing and business growth. In terms of daily, weekly, and monthly activities, what would you say are the most important and pivotal for your business, and what, or maybe what can generally recommend to other people as well?
My dogs are bugging out right now, but yeah, I think networking in general, regardless of whatever your industry, and making connections because it's relationship building, even though certain components, even of digital marketing. So, search engine optimization, you have on site, which is content strategy, you have off site, link building, and then you have technical, the way the site is built, how it performs, how it functions, the speed of the site. So, I incorporate that relationship in terms of helping you position yourself. So promoting your own content, syndicating your content, in terms of kind of link building also. before people would like reach out, hey, can I get a link on your site, or doing things or efforts that are kind of free. So like free directories, free this, free that. That doesn't carry that much value in 2020, 2021. So incorporating things of a different content type. So like I've been pushing, like I have a podcast. I believe the audio medium is superior in terms of marketing. So I've actually pushed different things in terms of effort. So I worked with PRX before, so it's a top 5 podcast network. Um, in terms of media buys on shows like TED Talks Daily. So I'm familiar with working with, podcast networks and stuff like that. And I don't think I would have had that relationship if not, podcasting myself. So I think that opened up doors, and then seeing how going on other shows and my show. So like, okay, your site or your show is on 30, 40, let's say whatever amount of sites in terms of like audio consumption. Majority of them carry over that backlink. So technically, if you're launching an episode wherever you're hosting your audio, then it's syndicating via the RSS feed. It's like a syndicated option. So from that one link, if you're linking to a client's website, you may have 40 different backlinks from, 40 different sites that obviously can also deliver referral traffic, as well as, SEO value to a certain extent. There are no follow links. There's follow and no follow. If a link is follow, it directly passes kind of that SEO value. No follow links are still valuable, just in case somebody doesn't know. And then, a lot of podcasts have websites too. So you can have a bigger write up in terms of who you are, what you do, and then link directly also. So I've utilized like the interview process and created, workflows and services that really adapt to 2021, where stuff like that, relationship building carries over to you getting a PR opportunity, which I think I consider a podcast interview a PR opportunity, as well as an organic traffic and referral traffic opportunity, as well as a social media opportunity. So, like, I think helping clients and incorporating the audio medium, podcasting, advertising on podcast networks have opened them up to reaching their audience in a different way, consuming content in a different way, and then adding value to their overall campaigns.
Mm. In terms of strategies of how to implement that into business, let's talk about networking. What kind of networking opportunities can entrepreneurs find or activate themselves into on a daily basis?
People, I think a lot of people are discouraged to do things. They just feel like it's just too daunting, and it's because they didn't try. So one year, obviously, it's dependent where you live. So like I'm about 50 minutes away from New York City, about 45 minutes from Philadelphia. So obviously, New York City, you can network and meet a lot of people that you may have seen on YouTube or at a conference or stuff like that. So I had a goal to meet as many people as I wanted to, that off a specific list, or that I've learned something from, or I wanted to talk to more about, but for free. So like not at a conference, not at like paying for some event. So that year I met Gary Vaynerchuk for free, Lewis Howes, Gerard Adams, Max Levchin, which is a co-founder of PayPal, and just getting into events for free, finding things in terms of networking opportunities where you can connect to like CMO of Walmart or of jet.com, and all of these things are like completely free. So like you have to look for it. It's just, people think that other people aren't reachable or attainable, but you would be surprised if you actually did the legwork, or you had somebody internally, like a personal assistant, you come up with a process to find these opportunities and really capitalize on them. I mean, it's a lot of it is just a lot of research and a lot of then building that relationship. So, right now, I think my podcast and other podcasts has been a good source of, okay, I'm on an interview, but we made a connection outside of the interview. So in the future, we may be able to help some, each other in some way. Now that obviously isn't the reason why I connected with you, but if I can help you in any other way in the future, I'm more likely to do so based on, our communication and based on the interview. So I feel like even with 2021, like it's a whole different kind of climate. Just because you can't meet in person doesn't mean you can't meet at all. I'm actually like part of a group for Inc. magazine. It's an Inc. solopreneur group. It's like a beta group for, like top, smaller size companies globally. And they had a Inc. conference about a few months ago, and they had an interesting concept. If I figure out the name of the platform, I'll let you know off air. But they had a digital networking where it's basically like, okay, 30 people jump on that sign up for it, and it like shuffles the people and then pairs them together, and you get a 5 minute clock, and you just like rapid network, and it just rotates, and then the next person pops out, and then the next person. So like in that hour, I got like 20 people that I talk to, which pushes you to interact as well, because obviously there's introverts and extroverts.
Mhm.
And that structure really pushed, and I think opened up regardless of who you are, because you're kind of put on the spot. And really, if you really share the time and don't hog the time with the other person, you have 2.5 minutes to really refine who you are, and what your unique value proposition is as a person, or what you're about.
Very cool. What would you suggest to start with to start finding those free opportunities?
Uh, Honestly, like when I started using Facebook to actually like connect with people, when I started podcasting, that was like the biggest thing. So, uh, even I think LinkedIn has really come a long way in terms of like turning into a content platform. But in terms of like their groups, there's still a lot of inactivity in terms of even large groups. So I would say whatever you're interested in, join a Facebook group. I think if it's a specific area, if you ask a question, people are like, you'd be surprised how helpful people actually are, or to offer some kind of free advice or advice. I mean, right now they have, I mean, it's on Apple only in the Apple Play Store, but they have Clubhouse, which is like an interesting format now in terms of just an audio social media type, social media platform that's focused on audio, where you can like literally like be in a room and learn from like top industry leaders around the world. I've been kind of pissed that I didn't roll out on Android, and I thought I could go on my wife's iPad, and they had it in the App Store for iPad or like those devices, but they
Yeah.
did not, because I've had several people send me invites already, which I guess it's invite only at this point, and like
Mhm.
I can't get on because I don't have an
Yeah,
iPhone.
I feel you. I just like in the previous conversation I had like a couple of days ago, they say like, yeah, like get on there. Like it's just such a good opportunity to connect the network. And I was like, I don't have it. I have Android. That's it. Need to find a simulator how to get on there. Well, all right. Talking about goals, we've understood how you plan. Let's talk about outsourcing and managing people. What kind of advice can you give to other entrepreneurs in terms of outsourcing their tasks?
Yeah, I think it's what you're actually trying to outsource and where you're hoping to go. So, I mean, me personally, I'm from Eastern Europe. And in terms of Ukraine, Ukraine has a lot of good, web development and engineering talent. Like I would compare it with, something like in terms of par anywhere in the world, they're, comparable or competitive. I mean, a lot of companies in terms of being founded are from Ukrainians or straight out of Ukraine in terms of like the tech industry now. But I mean, it's what your needs are and what your goal is in terms of a business, as well as like what your budget currently is. So a lot of stuff that I do, like I'll tap in terms of structure, I'll tap people that are US based that I've worked with and I have a personal relationship with, and know they're either a freelancer, a digital nomad, or work with partnerships with other agencies. So say like their structure, or they're really good at, or what they want to do is a paid search, because in digital marketing, like you can be a full service agency, or like we are the content agencies, we are the social media agencies. So some agencies, like that's all they want, but then they'll bring in a partner and then scope like the proposal out that way, which I've had a lot of the time, where agency comes to my agency, hey, we've seen what you've done with XYZ, this is what we're trying to do for this potential client, can you scope, or do a proposal, or what would it cost, and what is included within that. And obviously you include that in the price point. If it makes sense, they'll go back to the that proposed client, and if they end up signing a contract, you basically deliver it. I mean, it's in a way like white labeling. So like your
Mhm.
service, like, I mean, sometimes that that agency will say they're working in partnership with me or my agency, or sometimes they just want to say that it's them and take credit for it, which is fine because, if the compensation there, it's there. So just depending on that structure. So like you can
Hmm.
utilize freelancers, you can utilize, outsourcing internationally, which has been popular over the years in terms of global economy, or like I said, like work with other like-minded businesses that kind of refer out business to you as well in that sense as well. So like and maybe like there's some times where it's like there's too much overflow for this one project and there's a deadline, you can tap people on a as is basis, including agencies that may bill by the hour and not necessarily by like a contract. So I mean it's situational, like what your actual needs are.
Hmm. In terms of hiring from abroad, what is the process that you stick to? Maybe you can give some advice in terms of what to look at, what to focus on, to maybe make sure that the agreements are met, or what do you specifically look in people when you outsource abroad?
Yeah, I mean that's a hard one when somebody that's fulfilling and it's on your team on the other side of the world. Like you have to build that trust over time, but even before making the decision about bringing on that person to fill a need or a role, I think it's important to see what they've done. So really understand that, and not only like them presenting, okay, here's a this is a body of work, but figuring out some of their past or current clients who you can reach out to and really speak to. So
Mm,
figuring out who they are or how they work with them, because that's one thing to fulfill, but it's another thing how that relationship and that communication will work. So
mm,
like, or they may be really good at fulfillment, but in terms of communication and relaying things or working remotely with a team that's global, they might be combative or may not share information the way you want. So really understanding what their process is, not only like their capabilities, so like what their hard skills and soft skills are. So like what that knowledge base is, what they've done for clients, but also soft skills like in terms of leadership, in terms of emotional empathy, emotional IQ, if any information from former people they worked with, not only clients, but if they worked with team members. So getting as much information as possible to make sure that they're a good fit, both from like a tactics and competency level to like a good overall fit for your team, which I mean regardless of who you are, you're probably remote right now anyway. So
do you give them some like? Do you hire straight away, or do you give like test I don't know, tasks, or you let them work for a project for a small fee and then introduce full on, or what's the process?
yeah, before that it's just kind of like going through like a sample set or something, like a portion of a campaign that isn't necessarily like tied in. So like the strategy and tactics are already there. So it's not like something that they can like sabotage on that end if there's something that they don't know, but something that they should know to be able to be competent. And then everything else, like if they're, hungry enough to get to a certain level or attain more knowledge, I think having to demonstrate that and demonstrate that passion is important too, but really showing that in a portion of the project, not necessarily like here, I'm bringing you on, a portion at a time and see how you do. Before even someone's hired, really give them some kind of a test example or have some kind of like screening process in that sense. And then, slowly kind of like usually on like a discretionary basis, like start integrating them on certain tasks. If there's tasks that overflow to different projects. So if you're doing the same thing, if you have a similar thing for like five accounts that has to be done that week, and that you trust them with doing that, have them do that across those five clients, and then start giving them more responsibility as you feel more comfortable. But I think really having like a trial process is important as well.
Mm. Yeah, like I had an idea. I totally forgot it just now. I also wanted to ask about in terms of getting those people on board and working with you. Um, do you have like how do you understand how much to pay them for the work they do? Because as like as they say, like each country has its own price points that is an average wage and so forth. How do you make that decision on how much you compensate them for what they do for their work?
Yeah, I mean, it's what you want to invest, I guess, overall. in that role and in them, if you see them being a vital part of like an integral part of your team or your business, that you can't necessarily kind of like, if you see that like they're the best person they've seen in that role, in 10 years, then, make them happy and make them feel obviously like wanted and appreciated. Sometimes obviously a business has to run and it has overhead, but usually like what's comparable for that country, and sometimes a little bit more. Obviously, like countries like Philippines, India, Pakistan, like the rate is really low. If you pay them at least like maybe even like the minimum wage of that country that you're in, it can really like deliver a lot more value in that sense. But I mean, it depends what like the investment is. Are you what you're kind of willing to invest in that too? Because you do have to run a business as well. And I mean, communicating that and being flexible with that and being able to pivot. Okay, this person has done a great job for a month or two. Maybe we, compensate them some more, or
Hmm.
figure something out where it's like a different pay model where it's not hourly, but if it's on a project basis. So, but I mean, even in the US, like it's ridiculous. I worked for an agency. I had a pharmaceutical account. It's a global company. Basically, for 8 hours of my time, that agency was getting $40,000. So, and I was getting a salary. So you can only imagine, like, what the margin there was. And nobody else. Like I was managing the team that created all the assets. I created the strategy. I approved everything before it went out the door, and everybody else, the agency got a check. But it's just one of those things where like sometimes it's better to pay more in the long run to kind of have that reputation and really like get a good standing. If somebody's worth it, I recommend like keeping them happy.
Got you. In terms of the transmissioning from being a solopreneur into a business, what do you believe the first hire should be or can be for a business?
Well, it depends. Well, I think you should really jot down like what all those operating tasks are. What are you currently doing? Like obviously, if you're a solopreneur, you're doing financials. If you're not in marketing, you're trying to market your business, put it out there, get new clients. If you're not in marketing, I mean, I would say a hybrid sales and marketing role, or someone that can actually like take on billable hours. So regardless of what you do, like as much as you can take off your plate that's billable, then leaves you to business development, networking, prospecting, or whatever like your passion is, or whatever that thing is in terms of like the building block you think will get you to the next level in terms of a business. Now, some people would like to stay on the level, which is fine. But if you like want to scale, I think having that hybrid role, or evaluating that from a situation to situation basis where like most of your time is being sucked. And if you can group that in terms of a set of skills and duties and create like a even a hybrid role sometimes, like okay, you're hiring somebody for marketing, but they may have like a tax experience or like a financial experience. Like, yes, this is your core competency, but can you take over billing clients for me as well and stuff like that. So really, sometimes creating a hybrid role and getting as many things off your plate as possible.
Good answer. I like it. Let's look at the buyer's journey. And what do you believe in the buyer's journey is one of the most important steps, and how to maximize the conversion of that step?
Yeah, I mean, convincing. I think it takes it. Well, for me, in terms of like the industries I work, it takes like seven, eight, nine touch points to actually get an action. So, a form submission, a call, an inquiry about a demo, selling directly or selling a product or a good. So it takes that much to get to it. So having your content strategy and having so I think to simplify marketing, it's basically having your core assets and materials, who you are, what you do, and why you, and then packaging that for each place that you're going to position it. So obviously you have that message, and how do people consume content on where you're positioning it? So, okay, I have this, let's say video. How do I incorporate it? Because majority of my target audience spends their time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn versus Facebook versus obviously it's rare if you're targeting on LinkedIn and then you're going to be like really active on TikTok, but let's say TikTok or let's say I think the way content is created, there's only so much you can do. All right, text, audio, video, and image. So incorporating all that to tell your story and then putting your story to where it could be delivered where your target audience spends most of your time. So having all those assets created and then plugging them in the sales process. So like obviously to begin with, you need some awareness and how you're going to build awareness. So some of the things you may do that, you may do retargeting. So really having that content in place to get you through that whole buyer cycle. So, having social media posts, having things like that kind of just tips the iceberg, having a great landing page on your site, having additional assets. So having videos, if you have different audio clips or interviews about speaking about your product or service, and then having like database things that really get you over that hurdle. So if like a potential prospect reaches out to you, I saw you online or whatever, can you give me more information? Really have like that data backed information or assets ready. So case studies, white papers, in the news articles, things where like really demonstrate what you've done or what your product does to basically alleviate that concern. Because the last kind of like hurdle is, why should I go with you? And concerning like, it's like eliminating the doubt, I think, is one of the last steps in terms of getting somebody to sign and figuring out that last point of, okay, this is why you should go with us versus your competitors, and really demonstrating that because people create content to fill that funnel, but a lot of the time it's very kind of like tight
Mm-hmm.
and dry and doesn't really show who a business is. So showing who a business or a company is or what their core values are, I
Mm-hmm.
think really helps you alleviate or amplify that message and really helps you connect on that sense as well.
Here's a great question for you. Let's think about, right, the business is potentially pivoting or they are entering the online. And what would you say, like, if we take into account that we need, let's say, 5 to 7 touch points for people to reach out to you? What do you believe can those, like, let's say, average like 7 to 10 first pieces of touch points be for a beginning business that didn't have, let's say, didn't have clients or results before in that sphere? They just starting out and want to position themselves. What can they have as touch points, those base ones?
I think really demonstrating your process or like whatever it is you do, really making it very clear and easy to understand. I mean, in pharma, life sciences, financial services, business analytics, stuff like that. Like oftentimes it's very complicated. The software is new. What it actually does, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of integrations, things of that nature. So really kind of, I guess, dumbing it down to a level where anyone in the decision making process may understand. I mean, usually like sometimes you're targeting a specific decision maker, let's say a CFO that will ultimately sign a check, a CMO. But I think thinking about it like having anyone at that company understand what you do and what value you add, I think makes it as easy as possible and like gets you past that barrier of entry in terms of understanding. So having that, having like how to's, having FAQs, having a video that walks you like through, and then on the opposite side, like really showing who you are. So like having videos of like employees really show like what it is, what they do at the company, what the company means to them, or like a letter or statement from the executive team. Like, this is what we're about. This is what our core values are. This is what we're trying to accomplish. And if we align with who you are, because I mean, ideally, I think any business relationship, like they want to be like-minded, they want to be on the same page. So you're not necessarily like, if you have the option, hiring somebody that goes against kind of your core values or what your business is about. So really demonstrating that, and I think that'll help you connect a lot better and faster with a target audience or a prospective person that you're possibly working with.
In terms of like looking a little bit deeper into the aspect, like what do we stand for? What are the values? What do you believe? What kind of pieces of content can be created as a foundation?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends if like the founder of the company is still there. It depends, like, usually you have like your, statement of who you are as a company and like building on that. Okay. We're caring, but what does that mean? We're caring. We're caring because we're in this community. We've helped this community, grow. We've created, 100 jobs within this community. We volunteer all the time. We do environmental cleanups. So, really showing that like personal side of the company. So, any volunteer work you do, any, pro bono stuff you do, any humanitarian stuff that you do within a community or within like who you like, just demonstrates who you are. So it shows you outside of a boardroom or outside of a meeting room or outside of a cubicle, who you are as a company, how employees actually interact. Because I mean, you can put anything online, honestly, but eventually, like if you do enough research, you'll find the truth. So I think like figuring out like the camaraderie of a company, because I mean, there's a lot of companies that make a lot of money, but aren't necessarily a great places to work, or kind of toxic and have a toxic internal culture. And in terms of making a decision, like really demonstrating, like, okay, maybe like one of the things that you want to highlight is your executive team has stayed together for, let's say, 10 years. So like there's that camaraderie there. People don't jump ship or jump around. I mean, obviously there's a lot of businesses in terms of like an executive or C-suite, the C-suite person is usually the first one cut in terms of something not working. But really figuring out like something that really stands you apart and really that helps you connect to, ultimately who you're trying to reach. I would say stories about individual employees. Like I like, if I'm like trying to collaborate or partner with a company, really going through their employees and see how much I can learn from like that employee page. Sometimes it's just a picture, but I like when it's like personal. So, this person, has come from here to there. Like this is what they do in their personal lives. This is what they enjoy. This is like how they interact with their employees. The company sponsors charitable events, they sponsor team building, whatever. So really getting that personal side of the company and the executive team and really like showing who that potential client is going to be working with and making them feel comfortable.
That sounds something more in lines with corporations, where you do have a large team and a sweet C-suite and so forth. Does the same thing work for smaller companies where there's a solopreneur or a really small team?
Yeah, I mean, it's whoever's on your team. And I mean, personally, like I hate when like a company or a bigger agencies just puts their executive team, because ultimately their executive team does, a little of the actual like day-to-day work. They make obviously the business decisions, they do some of the strategic things, but a five-person executive team may have, 1,000 people behind them. So who are those 1,000 people? So for
Hmm.
you or your company, that may be you and three other people. Okay, who are those three other people? And really show who they are. Because I mean, like me personally, like when people are left out, like the entry level people off a site and stuff like that, they're like kind of the unsung heroes of the company, and I like seeing that as well.
Mm. If you would have had to start all over, like a new business, fresh start, what would be those first pieces of content that you would do?
I mean, at the time that I started, I think I would be a lot more heavier into video, because YouTube was just kind of starting out and you
No,
had
I
like
mean
their
like right now, like imagine a situation
in
where everything is a
2021.
fresh, yeah, everything is a fresh. What would be that for you to get back up as fast as you can? What would be the pillar content things that you create?
I mean, video and audio, I mean, honestly, video, because I can cut the audio out. So video, and then I can transcribe. I can have the audio as audio, like an audio file, and then transcribe it. So I would say a long form video that introduces you to the company, what you do, try to cover as much as possible. Have whatever your team members, if they're remote, if they're, I would even mention like if you have a constant outsourced team, really like go on to like a Zoom or somewhere where you see everyone. And I think actually like in 2021, a lot of like not professional and not touch videos get a lot more engagement because it's
Mm.
like a lot more like raw and real and not like let's touch this up like a fabricated Instagram image. It's
Hmm.
just like this is who we are. Like even if you put like a video on your cell phone, you walk through like your home office and then you sit down and you go on to Zoom and this is my team and this is what we can do for you. Just having a long form video that then you can repurpose because from that you can, I think make content for any platform and then
Hmm.
cut that up, short form video clips, different audio clips. And I think creating a longer video would then position me to create additional content. So that would be kind of the
Mm.
first piece of content I would create.
What would be there? Like, what kind of topics would you touch in that long form?
I mean, if it's just like me just pivoting into a into industry, it would be my backstory. It'd be straight up like, listen, I just graduated college. I mean, it's 2021. I mean, I thought I was going to do this. I'm learning this. I think I'm a fairly good expert. I've done this possibly for free for other people, and I'm taking the leap now. This is my backstory. This is who I'm about. This is what we can do for you. If you entrust us, we can get you there. And these are the team that are going to get you there. So like being as authentic as possible and sharing like that story to begin with.
So transparent, sharing the story, and sharing what are you looking to build for the client.
Yeah, like what your vision is, what your goal is, like your passion. Then I think showing like that emotion in that video. I think like a lot of scripted videos are very like dry and like there's no emotion in there, but like really showing you're passionate about it, you'll do your best, you're confident in yourself, and demonstrating kind of those aspects of it can I think really connect with an audience.
Beautiful advice. Let's look at the concepts of better understanding yourself in terms of like running the business and like working through these decades of questions and self-awareness. Did you come across any specific tools or systems that actually boosted your self-awareness greatly?
I don't know about tools or systems, but I mean just taking the time for myself and having like a just unchaotic time to think and come to a realization of what like actually like what's going on, because a lot of the stuff that's going on, you kind of choose to ignore. What's going on, but like, okay, I don't want to come to terms with it. So really, I guess owning things, or owning just everything that's going on, and owning who you are at that moment. But for me personally, just like silence, taking
Mm.
time, 5-10 minutes, and just like really, I guess, just being in thought and trying to clear my head and just like focus on like what my vision is, if that vision is still like, what am I doing in terms of the chaos around me? Are like the things I'm doing around my life chaotic that maybe leaving or taking me further away from that? Like what is just going on with me and what am I currently feeling? Because oftentimes you're so busy you don't even like comprehend how like what your current emotions are. I mean, I've experienced that with, I lost my grandfather in February of 2019. And it was like that. It was like I was so busy that like I almost didn't have enough time to grieve in that process. And I think I was trying to stay busy to cope with it. And then when I got some free time, like those emotions really hit. So I think understanding that and really coming to terms, like in a moment, kind of a peace. So find whatever like thing that gets you to that peace as close as possible.
Do you have any like what's your comfort zone to get into that zone of peace, or where do you go? Where do you find yourself where you are able to achieve that?
Uh, just everybody's out of the house because I mean I'm working from a home office and the dogs do not bark. So you've heard the dog bark earlier. With everything going on, there's like deliveries of packages every 5 seconds on the street. But just having a few minutes and just like not looking at my email, not looking at anything, stepping away from the screen, getting a cup of coffee, maybe, you're just hydrating in terms of water, and just like just sitting there just by myself for a few
Hmm.
minutes, and then taking whatever like level that I reached from that, moment.
Mm, got you. Looking at self-care rituals, how do you try to keep yourself as healthy as possible, like in your mind, in your emotions, physically? How do you care for yourself?
Yeah, but like with everything globally in the last year, I kind of like straight up dropped off. I'm not gonna, sugarcoat it. I mean, prior to that, I started really working out when I guess I was 18, and I'm currently 36. So like for like 15 years straight, I worked out at least few days a week. I mean, even on vacation, I'll try to do some calisthenics to run or whatever, and that actually added a lot of clarity. A lot of stuff in terms of a business decision or in general thought process. Like I like to, go work out, go for a run, go for a bike ride, go for like a hard, like, lift weights for a half hour, 40 minutes, and then think about it again because it adds that kind of mental clarity. I know a lot of companies before like this whole lockdown stuff happened, pandemic, they've had walking meetings and stuff like that. So because it puts you in a different mindset, like it adds that clarity, it adds that kind of, hit in terms of that exercise releasing different
Mm,
endorphins and stuff like that. So I think that's actually helped and kept me a lot more focused than if I didn't have some kind of physical activity for that extended period of time.
mm. Do you have like a certain morning ritual, for example, for yourself, or you just get right into work?
Well, well, right now it's either my wife and I. We have to take our younger foster kids to daycare, and then I come back. I have to feed and take my dogs. I have two dogs, and then I'll make a cup of coffee. I'll usually sit maybe 10 minutes, and then really, sit down and figure out, like, look at my schedule, look at my calendar, look at my emails, like my create my to-do list. And I mean, that's all within a process or a time span of like an hour. So
Mm,
if I wake up, let's say at 7, usually have to take the kids at 7:30. So by from 7:30, I would say to 8:30 is like that whole time frame.
got you. In terms of activities that helped you to scale and grow your agency, what would you pinpoint was like kind of the real influence for the growth of income?
I would say adding as much value or being receptive to adding much value as possible and really starting out, not burning bridges. So if I left places, I would be leaving them on good terms and keeping that, connection alive. Because
Mm,
in that sense, I think your work supersedes and your results anything, or a way you feel about somebody. If you're best in the industry and you may feel a certain way, it doesn't necessarily mean about their skill set. Maybe you have something like you don't like them just because you don't like them. I mean, there's people like that. But you have a potential client and they're looking for a service that that person is like the best in class in. It, if there's a large enough drive in terms of compensation, like you will put that personal thing aside and reach out to the person that's an expert. I've had people where I worked at, one place, and when I started doing my own thing in terms of my agency, like I didn't necessarily like, in this a professional sense, I didn't like them. I thought they were like very sloppy, not organized, like threw people under the bus. But then they like went somewhere else. It's like, I know you did good work, so and so. I was like, what? Like I thought like you had an issue with me. So it's one of those things. You demonstrating your skill set and your expertise and your results, like and you maintain those relationships, they speak for themselves. And I've had a lot of people reach out from that. Like, I have this potential client or I have this relationship that I think you can really develop. So I think just creating as many relationships throughout the along the way for whatever you do. If you, start a
mm,
business right away, or you graduate college and start a business, or you work for other companies and then jump into your own thing, the relationships you build along the way will kind of help you fast track your business if you've done and demonstrated who you are well.
got you. That's great piece of advice, not to burn bridges and stay emotionally intelligent and understanding how to develop those relationships in the long run, even though you potentially react to it in not such a pleasant way at first. And in the long run, that can pay off. Great advice. Let's look at the final part, the surrounding. How would you say the surrounding impacted your growth and success through your journey of developing your business?
Surrounding in the sense of what, my environment or like my
People,
upbringing.
people around
Oh,
you. Yeah.
that I mean, it fostered, it amplified, and basically sped up the growth. And like people, and it is true, like from what I've seen in my experiences, like the people around you define who you are and your mindset. So
Mm.
like everybody in a certain company I was at were either getting promoted, going to other companies and taking higher roles, becoming freelancers, starting their own agencies or consulting services. And then I saw, like, I hung out with them, and they were passionate about what they did. They talked about like motivating stuff that then like my mindset started to change, and they were always positive and always like sharing information and being helpful. And then I started kind of like, why not me? Like my skill set, at times is even, greater, or my experience is more than the people that have done this. And it like validated and removed some of the fear. Like, if they can do it and I'm this much, I've managed this many more clients or this much more spend, why can't I do it as well?
Hmm.
Because I mean, if you want to stay in that position, you can stay in that position, because I think founding a company, having a side hustle, whatever you're doing on your own, isn't necessarily for everyone or everyone's lifestyle. So I think it's situational. So if somebody wants to stay and work for a company 30, 40 years, or do whatever, if that fits you, that's great. But like if you get people, surround yourself with people with a mindset of being entrepreneurs and being hungry and
Hmm.
kind of being like trailblazers in their industry, like eventually that's going to rub off on you.
Hmm. How did you like? What did it take to create that surrounding for yourself? To be surrounded around those people? Did you like personally reach out, or was it like natural for you that they surrounded you, or how did that come to be?
No, I mean, we just connected at work. Like I was blessed when I left the place where the person, had the cat pass away. The company that I was at after that, like it had a large department of people my age. So at the time I was like mid-20s, and there was a lot of, people straight out of college and like similar viewpoints, similar hobbies. So it's like at lunch, everybody went out to lunch, like did activities right after work, like, played sports and whatnot. So there was like that camaraderie, and like obviously like became friends outside of work. And then people started doing the same thing I was doing outside of work, so that naturally, like, we're still friends. Okay, he built an agency, he went somewhere, let's collaborate, let's do this, let's talk
Hmm.
about strategy, let's talk about tactics, let's push each other to do more networking, go to events. And it was just like that accountability like really pushed me.
Mm. Have you ever been part of masterminds?
I have not. I am not opposed to them. It's just one of those things I have never. I've actually been like, I'm friends with a bunch of people that do masterminds, that like in the affiliate space, in the marketing space. Like I've hung out with them. That they charge 10, 20, 30, $40,000 for like a select group of people to come and fly out wherever, and they basically like fast track you in a way, like data dump. This is all I learned, and this is what works for me. I mean, I'm open to them, but like I said, a lot of the people that I've networked with and interacted with and have been friends with and hung out with, like those conversations are like naturally had. So I have like the inside, I guess, pass or fast track. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important, like masterminds are great, as well as like having a mentor and figuring a mentor that's like in a place in their life where you want to be in, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I think that can really kind of fast track you and propel you and really change the way you think about things as well.
Hmm. Can you give to the listeners some advice in terms of, like you mentioned, having a mentor? What kind of mentors do you believe are out there, and potentially how to find one?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be, because I think it's really unattainable. Like, okay, yes, like I really connect with Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm going to reach out to them, and he's going to be my mentor. I mean, the guy doesn't have time to sleep. You know what I mean? He gets bombarded all the time. So someone like that is a little bit unrealistic. You have to find somebody like within your life, or maybe somebody you've met or something, like, and not come at them like, I want you to be my mentor. And then like that person has to, if you want to really mentor somebody, you have to devote some kind of amount of time. You have to have some kind of FaceTime, either remotely or in person, and kind of like keep that person accountable in terms of a mentor, I think. So really possibly like offering something of value. So like this is where I'm at, like figuring out what that person may need, or a mutual relationship where like you can both help each other, figuring something else like that out. But I mean, there's plenty of people that have, in my industry, founded digital marketing agencies. Different agencies have either grown them or kept them where they are in terms of revenue, have sold them, and a lot of them are open to discussions, open and things like that. So I think it's just one of those things where like you should ask, but you should be realistic as well.
Hmm. What can be the first step to build that relationship? Like, what can be like to reach out, or in what way, or how can the person, others do that?
Yeah, I mean, I personally like being genuine about it, but like whatever, like what do you have in common? um if you have something in common, you'll resonate, or like revolve around that person. So like if I reached out to you, obviously off air you said you speak Russian, in terms of like Eastern Europe and stuff like that. Like that may be something that we connect with. So I can be like the opening, like to the email can be like kakila or whatever. So something that's like like personal, that like gets that person to stop and like actually read it, or like direct messaging someone on a social media platform, but not pitching them something or not pushing something, like genuinely like I've seen what you've done in terms of like your expertise, what you've grown. I admire what you've accomplished and hope to accomplish something similar. I'm already on the track. So like this is a little bit more about me. And like, I also see that you're from like the same part of the world as I am. And it'd be great if like we can touch base, if it was in person, like meet up for a cup of coffee, or if I can, offer you something in terms of some, knowledge or resource I have that may help you out, that, we can like circle back. And then it's not like I want a half hour or hour. Like start with, a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation. Like the least you ask, the more likely you're going to get
Hmm.
a yes.
To open the door, right? And you've mentioned a really great thing, where to appreciate first, and then like see the next step of the connection. That's a great advice. Let's wrap up this interview with a nugget of golden advice from you. So, what would you suggest to listeners? What advice can you give that they can take action right now to make the most out of 2021 for the business?
Yeah, if you're comfortable, you're not doing something right, or you're getting complacent. So I say complacency is the death of innovation. So if you're not moving, you're not growing. So I think personally, like a lot of things that almost everything that I've accomplished has happened in a state of discomfort.
Mm.
So getting to a place where like I mean, it doesn't have to be super extreme, but like anything you want to do that or accomplish or scale, you're always going to have the thing in the back of your head to say like, well, you're good where you are, you're maybe jeopardizing revenue, you have someone on, like getting past that barrier. So basically whatever you're doing, I mean, ultimately it's a you versus you. So that's the first hurdle to get over. So once you get out of your own head, it's a lot easier regardless of what the things to come are, and you're more positioned that way. So I think like just because you have an opportunity that may look scary or daunting doesn't mean you should just give up or not even attempt it. Or if you're oftentimes being dissuaded. So, I mean, personal life. So, since June of 2018, my wife and I have fostered 23 kids. If you ask me, May or the previous year, would you be a foster parent? I'll probably say no, just a foster parent. But in like fast track, if you ask, by this time, would you have 23? I would not say I have 23 or had 5 kids at once and, managed to keep them all alive. So, it's just one of those things where like you don't know what you're capable of until you actually do it. So worst thing you can do is not try it at all, because if you do try it, okay, it may have not worked out. You get learnings from that. How can you pivot? It may not be the right thing. And like nothing's truly a failure if you learn something from it.
Super. Thank you for being with us, Roman. For everyone who is interested to know more about online marketing, about SEO, and everything else that Roman does, you'll be able to find it in the comments below. I'll provide all the links, all the contact details, and you'll be able to reach out. Roman also has his own podcast. Did I remember correctly? The Savage podcast, right?
The Digital Savage Experience.
Digital Savage Experience. And you will be also able to find that in the comments below. I believe Roman shares a lot of value in there. And thank you for being with us, Roman.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.